We're in the middle of a Sangonite theme called Life, but Not As We Know It. And it was cunningly revealed some way into the theme that this was another way of talking about the Noble Eightfold Path, the Buddha's Noble Eightfold Path. And we've seen during these talks that the Noble Eightfold Path is split into two sections. So the first section is just one of the limbs of the path, which is vision. So all those glimpses of something higher, something truer that we may have had through our lives. And then the rest of the path is the path of transformation. So it's allowing that vision, those glimpses, to transform all the different aspects of our being. So yeah, it's important that our emotions are affected and engaged, that our communication is in fact affected, and our action. So the last two talks have been about right action. So Bojanaga gave a talk about the law of karma, so about how we can shape our own future through how we act in the present. And then last week, Dharma Mai talked more about how our actions affect the world around us, how we can perfume the world around us. And she introduced us to the Bodhisattva ideal, where our whole motivation for practice becomes about benefiting others. And where we join with others in a collective aspiration to transform the world around us. So that brings us on to the next limb, which is right livelihood. So right livelihood, this is the whole area of our particular contribution to transforming the society around us through our work. And yeah, when it comes to livelihood, we're living in very strange times, very odd times. So in the current situation this year, many people's livelihoods will have been affected. So some of us, like myself, will have been put on furlough. Some people, like most of the people I know in India, will have lost their jobs completely. People will be facing insecurity, uncertainty in relation to livelihood. And many people may be working in quite difficult situations, those of us who work in the NHS or in care homes or in schools. So yeah, livelihood is on a lot of people's minds at the moment. You might wonder why there needs to be a separate limb of the path called right livelihood. Surely that's just covered under action, isn't it? And the reason is that our livelihood is extremely important because it occupies so much of our time and energy. I did a little calculation, being a nerd. If someone of my age had been working full-time and I allowed myself 6 weeks off a year, then I will have worked 55,000 hours by now. That's quite a lot of my life. So a lot of our identity is tied up with our work. And of course, it can be our main way of contributing to the world. And our work can leave its mark on us. So traditionally, that would be physical. So you might be able to tell a tailor by his hunched back, or a rickshaw puller by his lean calves, or a farmer by his calloused hands. I think for us, it's more likely to be mental and emotional, the mark that work leaves on us. Just a few days ago, I was on a Zoom call with one of my friends in India. And as I was talking, he said, what happened? What happened, uncle? You're breathing heavily. Is something happening at work? And then I thought, oh, is it that obvious? Is it that obvious that I'm carrying this tension around because of things that are happening at work? Or another example of that is, I think it was Mokshitara. She told me once she had something she wanted to ask me. She saw me in the center and I had my chairman's face on. And so she decided not to ask me. So I presume my chairman's face was a face full of the cares of the world and carrying sort of tension and responsibility. So in all sorts of ways, our work, our livelihood can make its mark on us. So what did the Buddha himself have to say about this area? Well, of course, in the Buddha's time, it was a very different context. So in that context, 2,500 years ago, there were basically two categories of people. There were the bhikkhus, the wandering monks, who owned nothing and who devoted all of their time and energies to spiritual practice. And the monks were completely dependent on the offerings of householders. So the monk's duty was to be easy to support, and the householder's duty was to support the monks, to share food, to share clothing. And this was a completely normal state of affairs in Indian society at the time. And in this context, the Buddha actually said quite a lot about livelihood, mainly addressing householders. He gave advice about the purpose of work, the duties of workers and the duties of employers. And he outlined livelihoods that should be avoided. So there's a sort of classic list of 5. So the list of 5 occupations to avoid: trading in living beings, okay, which we could think of as slavery, trafficking of people; trading in meat; trading in weapons; trading in intoxicants; and trading in poisons. So there seems to have been quite a trade in poisons at the Buddha's time. But underneath all this, there's a principle. So the Buddha's golden rule was that to do work that doesn't lead you to harm yourself or others. So no harm to others through exploitation or through encouraging other people to be unskillful, stoking up their craving, or promoting violence. And no harm, no degradation of yourself through acting unethically. So avoiding work that brings excessive stress, exhaustion, any work that we might describe as soul destroying. And ideally, the Buddha taught that we should do work that leaves time and energy for study, for meditation, for friendship, and for wholesome creative activities. And I think these underlying principles, this golden rule still holds true for us. But of course, the context now is very different. So we don't have that option to depend completely on others to support us to meditate and study. Just imagine standing with your robes and bowl on a Friday night in West Street, trying to convince people to support you to go on retreat. It's not going to happen these days. So, like it or not, we do all have to find some sort of work to support ourselves. And one of the central principles in Triratna is that commitment is primary, lifestyle is secondary. So there's a whole range of possible livelihoods and lifestyles through which we can express our commitment to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha, and through which we can make our contribution to the world. So yeah, commitment is primary and lifestyle is secondary, but not unimportant. So some livelihoods may be more supportive to our values and to our aspirations than others. But I think what I want to say is that it's up to all of us as individuals to make our own conscious decision about how we make a living, bearing in mind those underlying principles about non-harm as much as possible. So there's no blanket rules. We have to work it out for ourselves, and this may take time. So we may realize at times we've taken a wrong turn and end up feeling trapped in a work situation. And then we might need to make some changes. So yeah, this process of working out for ourselves how best to live in the world is really important. So a little bit about my experience. So I went to university in Scotland. I got a really good science degree, and it was the area of tropical medicine. And but at the same time as being at university, I was getting involved in voluntary youth work. And I remember thinking when I got my degree, this gives me a choice. This gives me a real choice about what I do now. And what I chose to do was not to follow a career in science, but to get part-time jobs which would allow me to do voluntary youth work, which I did for many years in Scotland and then in India and then in Sheffield. And I'm not saying that I made the best choice. Who knows? Who knows if I had followed a career path in tropical medicine, I might be developing a vaccine now for coronavirus, which of course would benefit hundreds of thousands of people's lives. So I'm definitely not saying here that it was the right thing not to have a career, but the important thing is I made my own decision at the time, and it was a conscious decision. I experienced it as a choice. And because of that, I have no regrets about it. The problem is many people don't even think of that as a choice, particularly younger people, I think. So get an education and choose a career. That's just what you do, isn't it? That's what it means to be a grown-up in this world. And people often say to me, oh, you're really lucky, Maitridasa, you've got so much freedom, you get to go to India, you don't have this really sort of burdensome responsibility at work. And I just think, well, I'm not lucky. I made choices, you know, and I made conscious decisions about it. So that's just one thing I'd say from my own experience, that following a career path is not the only option. There are many options open to us. That may be a good option, it may be the best option, but it's only one option of many options. So we're strongly influenced by attitudes to work and to livelihoods in our society. So success, achievement, usefulness, they're the gods of modern society. And a big one for me, a big sort of attitude that I've absorbed as I was brought up, is a sort of guilt and self-doubt in relationship to work. Am I working hard enough? Am I earning my place in society? Am I wasting my education? Sometimes I might be sitting around relaxing and I see somebody else working really hard, and this sort of guilt bubbles up that I should be working hard too. Or it might be the other way around. I might be working really hard and I see somebody loafing around and feel resentment towards them. So there can be this internal pressure to prove our worth through our work. And Sangharakshita's had some quite subversive things to say in this area. So I'm paraphrasing here, but Sangharakshita says, we are the glorious end product of millions of years of evolution. We're not here just to fill up our time with being useful. We don't need to justify our human existence by being useful. And he suggests that as the end products of million years of evolution, as being born as human beings, the only step really worth taking, you know, what we're really here for, is to grow towards Buddhahood, to fulfill our potential as human beings. It reminds me of verses that we say at ordination in Triratna. Today my birth has borne fruit, and my humanity has been fulfilled, and now I must live up to my birth. So to live up to our birth, to do that, then there needs to be room to grow. There needs to be space to grow into. There needs to be a spirit of freedom, creativity, spontaneity. If we're spending all of our time keeping busy, getting tired and stressed and burdened, always trying to prove ourselves or outdo others, then we can lose touch with that spirit of freedom, and there's no room to grow into. And the second subversive thing that Sangharakshita has said in this area, well, he's made a distinction between working for money and having a vocation, a true vocation. So a true vocation is work which is directly related to what is most important to us, to our highest values and aspirations. It's work that obviously benefits others, and it's intrinsically worthwhile and fulfilling for us. So we'd happily immerse ourselves in it, whatever we were paid. And if that's the case, that Sangharakshita says, then give yourself to it fully, wholeheartedly. Don't put any limitations on it. But if we're honest, that's quite a rare thing, I think. So to do work you really enjoy and which is truly beneficial is a true vocation. I think that's a luxury. And I think my perspective from spending many years in India sort of reinforces that. So most of my friends, they couldn't even think of a vocation. They just need to get a job to support their families. And I include order members in that. You know, order members who've committed their whole lives to practicing the Dharma, they still need just to get a regular job to support their families. So that is, I think that is the majority situation. So sometimes, yeah, we just work because we have to work. And in that case, Sangharakshita says, work as little as possible to support as simple a lifestyle as possible. So work as little as possible to support a simple life. And then whatever time and energy is freed up, then dedicate that to spiritual practice, to creative activities. That was quite a shocking thing for him to say. It sort of cuts right across the work ethic in our society. And Sangharakshita was accused of being irresponsible by saying that, for encouraging idleness in the youth. And but what he was trying to do, again, was to cut through this connection between our work and our worth as human beings. But of course, wholesome, productive work of many kinds can be very beneficial for us. It's actually a human need to, it's part of our well-being is to have work that we can put our energies into. So work can get our energies going. It can help us to integrate those energies, and it can give us opportunities to deepen our practice. So another aphorism of Sangharakshita's was, work is the tantric guru. So a tantric guru is someone who gives you direct, no-nonsense advice about what you need to do. And of course, on Sunday, we had a festival to the supreme tantric guru, that is Padmasambhava. So what Sangharakshita is saying is that work can do that for us. Work can give us direct teachings about where we're really at and how we can work on ourselves. So a little example for me. So I was at a Dharma Cafe team meeting a couple of weeks ago, and I was just conveying that one of my somebody else that I know had recently said to me that they'd known me for quite a long time and they'd always thought that I didn't like them, which was quite a shock for me because I do like them. But I was quite sort of upset that they thought that I didn't like them. And then one of my colleagues in the cafe team says, yeah, I know how they feel. I don't think you like me either. And well, that was information. That was information about how I am at work, because actually I'm very hardworking. I can be very sort of focused and very concentrated on work. And sometimes that clearly comes at the cost of friendliness and putting people at their ease. So that's just an example of how work situations can mirror things back to us. So yeah, the workplace gives us plenty of opportunities to practice the precepts, to improve our communication, to develop patience, and many other positive qualities. So the central task for most of us is to find ways to bring our work and our Buddhist practice closer together. So there's less of a separation. So we go to work in the daytime, and then we go to the Buddhist center in the evening, and then we're Buddhist. So what we're looking for, whatever our livelihoods, whatever our conditions, is to try and integrate somehow our Buddhist practice into our work. So the most obvious way of doing this, and some would say the ideal way, is to be part of what is called a team-based right livelihood business. So team-based right livelihood businesses have always been something quite important in Triratna, maybe less important these days, but we've always valued them very highly in Sheffield. So this is when Buddhists come together and set up a business or a way of earning a living together somehow. So examples of that in Sheffield, well, in the past we had the Evolution shop in Orchard Square. At the moment we've got Dana Cafe in Crooks. We've got Still Learning, the school visits business, which operates from the centre. In many ways, the centre team, which has responsibility for the running of the Buddhist Centre, is also a team-based right livelihood. And so team-based right livelihood businesses, they have several aims. So they provide a means of financial support for people to live a simple lifestyle. And that the principle behind that is take only what you need and give whatever you can. Take what you need and give what you can. So these businesses, there's rarely a wage system. It's each person individually decides what they need in the way of financial support, and then in return gives whatever they can. Team-based right livelihood businesses, so they provide a working situation based on friendship, which supports spiritual development. That's a key aspect, where we can deepen communication, learn to cooperate, to share skills, encourage each other to take time to go on retreats, do more meditation and study. So yeah, working with friends who are Buddhists, who have shared aspirations, can be really supportive. Another aim is to produce something of value to society as a whole, whether it's vegan breakfasts or introductory courses at the centre, or school visits which could change children's lives. So yeah, really trying to produce something of positive value. And then finally, if possible, to make money to finance Dharma activities, to finance wider Buddhist activities, to finance the spreading of the Dharma through the local centre. So the Evolution shop, which ran for many years in Sheffield, it was a very important part of my spiritual path. I got involved with it in the second week of my introductory course. There was an announcement on the intro course, and I went to see Dayavadra, and he said he was willing to give me a job on the basis that I seemed reasonably stable. And then it was just a wonder. Dayavadra just did a really, really good job of encouraging me, building my confidence, and I think without the shop, I probably wouldn't have stayed. I was in a bit of a mess at the time. I was a bit nervous of people, and I just really needed a team, some friends, practical tasks, and just something to throw my energies into. So thank you, Dayavadra. And so that's team-based livelihood businesses. So in theory, they're ideal. And there's so many stories I could tell about my experience in, so I worked in the shop and then the cafe, also in the centre. The main thing I want to say is that even though they're ideal in theory, there's no guarantees. So there's no guarantee that if you join a team-based right livelihood business, that it will actually work as a team. There's no guarantees of that. There's no guarantees that it will act ethically. There's no guarantees of succeeding as a business and making money. Sometimes the team can be really strong, but you're lousy at making any profits. Sometimes the business is really efficient, but then the atmosphere is not as ethical or as supportive as it might be. Sometimes the team's just not strong enough, so that people end up getting exhausted. So there's rarely everything in place all at the same time. And even if everything was in place, people will still irritate you, you'd still disagree, you'd still lose your temper, you'd still make mistakes. So one of the volunteers in the cafe is Sean, and I've worked with him a few times, and sometimes I'm just like really under stress cooking in the kitchen, and or I might swear when another ticket comes through, or I might drop something and scream, and I said to Sean once, like, what's it like working with me? Sometimes I wonder what you must think about older members. And he said, oh, Maitridasa, it's wonderful. I love just seeing you cock everything up. I love seeing you making mistakes and pulling yourself back together and trying again. So that's sort of a flavour of what team-based livelihood is like. In theory, the ideal supportive conditions. In practice, somewhere like everywhere else where you have to make an effort. You have to work on yourself. So in team-based livelihood businesses, we're trying to uphold higher ideals in the high street, you could say. But we're not ideal human beings. So like everyone else, we'll make mistakes and we have to strive on with mindfulness. Nothing can be taken for granted for any of us. So for whatever your work conditions, we need to do the work of taking any opportunity to put our commitment into practice, learning any lesson that comes our way, discussing difficulties with spiritual friends, doing our best to let our qualities shine and make our unique contribution. So I'm just going to finish up by reconnecting with Dharma Mai's talk last week on the Bodhisattva ideal. So yeah, work, it can sometimes, even when I say the word work, it sounds heavy. Work can sometimes seem like very heavy weather, or we make heavy weather of it, or a heavy burden, or it can be all-consuming, it can be draining. And the Bodhisattva, the image of the Bodhisattva offers us an alternative vision of how to be in the world. So the Bodhisattva doesn't take themselves too seriously. So they don't think that they are doing something special. Bodhisattva isn't some sort of overworked cosmic social worker hacking away at the world's suffering with a sledgehammer. The Bodhisattva actually is always seen as floating free, as shimmering in a blue sky, free to respond in any direction. So yeah, the Bodhisattva, it's an image of selfless, playful energy, bubbling up like a fountain, naturally, joyfully, spontaneously. The Bodhisattva doesn't really have any notion that they're working at all. And that's when right livelihood becomes perfect livelihood. And Shantideva compares a Bodhisattva's approach to work to geese who are swimming along in a lake and then suddenly plunge into a cluster of lotus blossoms, playfully plunging into the depths of the pool. So for the Bodhisattva, it's all play. It's a sort of game. It's a big laugh. So maybe we could aspire to bringing a bit more of that spirit of freedom and play into our work. Maybe we could just be satisfied with playing at it. And maybe that's the real work.